Good afternoon from, sad to say, a rainy UK, a rainy England. Because here I am in leafy Buckinghamshire, and delighted to have Jackie Lambert with me from the beautiful Stratford upon Avon, Shakespeare country, in her camper van, which we will talk about, a very unusual camper van at that. So we are here to talk to Jackie about her writing. So we will start as we always begin. How did you get into writing, and can you remember the first thing you wrote?
I most certainly can. I've always loved writing. I think it's something that I always did. I mean, I was very fond of English as a subject at school, and one of my favourite things was writing essays and creative writing. I managed to sort of leave school with A's in both English language and English literature, although actually I went on to become a scientist. So I'm actually a biochemist by sort of trade,
Wow.
but that also obviously involves lots of writing, in terms of publishing research and so on and so forth. But the first memoir I wrote was at the age of 14. My family used to spend, well, every holiday, every weekend possible up in the Lake District. You might be able to tell from my accent, I'm from the
Nice.
north of England.
Good.
So I'm from Blackburn in Lancashire, and we used to sort of zip up the M6 every weekend or for every school holiday. And up there we met a chap called Bob Orrell, who actually, he is an author himself. He wrote a book called Saddle Tramp in the Lake District and Saddle Tramp in Scotland, in which he sort of took a couple of fell ponies, the local sort of breed of ponies. He followed all the pack pony routes around the Lake District with those. Well, we were fortunate to be acquainted with him, and he once took me on about a 4-day trek with a couple of other girls around the Lake District, and then he encouraged us to write about it. He made us keep a diary, and that was my first real kind of attempt at sort of keeping a travel diary. But
Mm.
then he also made us write up all about our adventures, and he entered it in a competition, and I'm very pleased to say I came second. It was a
Wow.
national competition open to all great age
Yeah.
groups, so at the
Yeah.
age of 14 I was really quite
Wow.
pleased. So yes, that's the first thing that I wrote, and
Mm.
how I got into writing. And then
Right.
I think, because I think most authors or anybody who loves writing will always say you find ways, you find an outlet. So I was
Mm.
always the one who'd volunteer to write sort of newsletters for work, or
Mm.
subsequently I'm very much into windsurfing and skiing, so I used to write blogs for the National Water Sports Festival for the windsurfing side of that. And I was also an ambassador for Ratoon, which ran a website for just sort of finding out about ski resorts. So I've always managed to find, a way to find an outlet for writing,
Right.
really.
And you are still prolific. I mean, I know from
Mm.
word count, you're my token of a thousand plus subscribers. You're my diligent weekly, pretty much without fail, because sometimes you may be a week or two late, but you backtrack and go
Mm.
to the ones you haven't commented on my word count Wednesdays on my blog, and it's sort of very
Mm.
apologetic, as we often are, if we've had a week without any writing. But then when you say there's no hello dogs, when you say there's no right that you haven't written, you then run off a whole list of things you've actually been doing, which do count as writing, whether it's on a blog or rather than just specifically for your books. So do
Indeed.
you do pretty much write if every week, if not every
I,
day?
I would say I write most days, to be honest.
Mm.
I mean, we'll probably get onto it in a moment, but yeah, I mean, I have quite an unusual lifestyle in that I gave up work in 2016,
Mm.
accidentally bought a caravan, and then within a month, both my husband and I, we'd kind of rented out the house, sold most of what we own, and set off to travel full time. So since then, I mean, it was originally supposed to be a 3-year trip, but we're still here in 2024 and not quitting anytime soon. So ever since then, or even since before that, I've always kept travel diaries. you know, for sort of all the travel, so that I don't really lose. It's not so much even just the places that you've been, but how you feel and the experiences you
Sure.
have and the people
Yeah.
you meet.
Mm.
I always feel it's quite important to get that down as soon as possible while it's fresh.
Absolutely, because it's no
Yeah,
different. I say when I teach that really fiction is something is the difference between fiction and non-fiction really is that fiction is something that happens to somebody you've made up. So you've still
indeed.
got to
Yeah.
have the emotion and the so you are effectively your non-fiction character.
Yes,
And
yeah.
people character is does tend to be, and there will be some people who say no, plot's more important, but if you don't care about the character, then you will just sort of fizzle out reading something. And
I
blogs
couldn't agree
started as
more.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
sorry.
blogs
Yeah.
started as journals, didn't they? People
Well,
pouring out how
absolutely.
they felt
Yeah,
and what they
it's
were
a web
doing.
log. I mean, my blog, I try to refine a little bit. It's not just a brain dump. I use an app called Polar Steps, which is quite a neat little thing where you can just
Okay.
do a brain dump and it sort of plots where you are on a map and so on and so forth, which I
Oh,
find quite handy. So
yeah.
that's kind of my raw information, but then I
Mm,
kind of refine it into a story to go onto my blog. So I'd
mm,
hope that that's a little bit more refined and carefully
right,
thought through and
right.
edited. So
Have you written fiction?
I've never written fiction. I would always say that I don't really have the imagination to write
Okay.
fiction. I do
Mm,
like being creative about sort of how I address the travel. I mean, I do write. So, I mean, one reviewer did say that my comic asides were one of her favourite parts of my writing. So I do
oh,
sometimes
nice.
go off on a little bit of a side thing, but it's always based
Mm,
around fact and embellished
mm,
in facts or just telling it in
mm,
an entertaining way.
mm.
But you know, if someone gave me a writing prompt and said what would happen with this, I'd be like, no, no idea
Yeah,
really.
yeah.
I've just never really tried it.
Mm. But I
Yeah.
know from the paragraph or three that you put on the Word Count Wednesday comments on the blog that you literally, even if you haven't covered a lot of physical geographical space within a week, you seem to pack so much in that you almost have more material than not necessarily more material than you can handle, but I imagine you can get so many different stories out of a week's event in some places.
Oh, very much so. You know, because we tend to. I mean, both Mark and I enjoy history. You know, we love a castle. You know, anything like that. So, I mean, for example, this year, you know, on our way back, we've been up to the Baltic. So we were traveling in Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, and on our
Mm,
way back, we came through Poland. So we stopped at the Wolf's Lair, which was where there was a failed assassination attempt on Adolf Hitler, and we watched The Great Escape at Stalag Luft 3,
mm,
and then went to look at the tunnel Harry that was in the film and the cooler, which
right.
you know, appeared in the film. So you know, actually, that forms part of my writing.
Mm,
You know, I mean, with the travel, almost every day is different when we're traveling, so
mm,
there's something to write about. So I mean, I certainly have no shortage of material,
mm.
that's for sure. And sometimes that is a problem because it can you know, stall you a little bit. Sometimes I'm just a little bit overwhelmed with the amount of
Right.
stuff that there is to write about.
Mm.
But you know, certainly I'm never ever short of materials. So yeah.
Do you have a pretty good memory? Or do you make notes as you go to places? Because I'd go somewhere and think, oh, what did we do yesterday? And I must write everything down because otherwise, or dictate it into my phone because otherwise I'd forget the especially little detail that I'd want to put in.
Well, that's it. The little detail is absolutely crucial because that's,
Mm,
I think, what makes travel writing fascinating. It's what make destinations light up. And yeah,
mm,
my memory is shocking, and particularly when you do so much. You know, if we are traveling, as I say, we often move on every day or every couple of
mm,
days.
mm,
So I have to write things down, and that's where my polar steps come in. Or I mean, at all times I have about my person a little notebook. I'm a little
right.
old fashioned. I would love to say that I would keep notes on my phone, but I
Mm,
don't. I just write things in a notebook. But
mm,
yeah, absolutely, I keep lots and lots of notes.
mm,
And in fact, the internet age. I mean, I have very little. I live in the truck that you can see behind me, which is a space about sort of 6 or 7 meters by 2 meters. And I own very little, which is lovely. I love that. I love the minimal lifestyle. But my most treasured possession, and something I would never, ever get rid of, is my travel diaries from years and years of travel.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Yeah, in my and we were both own dogs. We'll come on to dogs shortly, but in all my dog walking jackets, I have a little notepad and at least 2 pens, just in case one of them doesn't run out.
You're
And I
very
don't always take
diligent.
well
Yeah.
round the block. I don't bother taking my phone, and maybe I should, just in case something happens.
Yes.
But I think it's nice to be detached from my phone for
Mm.
half an hour, 3 times a day or twice a day or
Yes.
something. But
Oh, well,
so
that's
you're
the
obviously
lovely thing. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
no, you carry on. No, carry
I
on.
was going to say that's the lovely thing about being retired, is that I have a different relationship with my phone now. That
Mm,
it's rare that people contact me, so I do carry the phone, and I suppose I do use it in the sense that I take lots and lots of photos, sometimes as an aid memoir,
yeah,
or
it's a good
I
idea.
do take photographs. Obviously, the blog is quite visual,
Mm,
so I do take photographs to pop on there.
mm,
But yeah, I do use it in that sense, but certainly not
mm.
as a notebook.
Right.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier on that the caravan was your impetus for changing your lifestyle. You're clearly not, and I know from your biography, you're clearly no longer in the same caravan. So tell us about your truck, how you went from the caravan to a truck.
Well, that's it. We travelled very happily for 4 or 5 years in a caravan. We chose the caravan because we windsurf, we ski, we have bikes, we have doggy trailers. We travel with 4 dogs,
Mm,
small dogs, but nevertheless, there's quite a lot of paraphernalia goes with that. And we
mm,
found that we just simply couldn't find a motorhome large enough to carry all of that. So we bought the caravan so that we could tow it with a van that was basically a toy box for all
right.
the things that we wanted to take with us.
Mm,
Now that went very well. I'm afraid I'm going to have to get slightly political here, because it was when Boris Johnson got voted in with a landslide majority, all of a sudden Brexit became inevitable. Now our lifestyle had been travelling, it had been year-long trips around Europe, and once
mm,
freedom of movement ended, we can only now sort of spend 3 months in every 6 months in the whole of Europe, whereas before it used
mm.
to, well, it was unlimited in Europe, and
Yeah.
then in non-Schengen countries we could spend 3 months in each country. Now
Mm,
it's 3 months in 29 countries, so
good
things
grief.
changed quite radically for
Yeah.
us. So I
Yeah.
mean, I uttered when that happened, Boris Johnson got voted in with a landslide, Brexit became inevitable, and
Mm,
I uttered a phrase to my beloved that changed our lives forever. I just sort of said, right, that's it. We can't travel in Europe anymore, so let's go to Mongolia. I
right.
mean, I've always quite fancied Mongolia, but clearly a caravan and a van were never going to make it across the Pamir Highway in the Gobi Desert.
No.
So at that point, we had to start looking for a more suitable vehicle, which is how we suddenly come to find ourselves in a 6-wheel army truck
Yeah.
that's 10 meters long, 4 meters high, and 2.5 meters
Yeah.
wide. So that's
So
how that happened.
this is sort of a
Mm.
half comical, half serious question. Presumably, you don't go to an Army and Navy surplus store to buy an army truck. How did you actually get it?
And we just searched on the internet, and
Okay.
it's funny, once you get into anything like this, if you're into Land Rovers or military vehicles, you'll find there are whole communities, who are interested in that sort of stuff, and particularly the Germans and the Dutch are very into their sort of overland vehicles. So I mean, we found a dealer in Rotterdam in the Netherlands who had
Mm,
just got a batch of Volvo N10s, which is the beast that we're driving now. He
right.
just had 30 of those decommissioned from the Belgian army, so he had those up for sale. So that's where we bought it
Okay.
from. So
Wow.
yes. Mm.
Goodness. So it's gonna. And do you know a history of it? I know we're going away from writing, but hey,
Yeah.
this is
No,
interesting.
well, not at all. I mean, this is the subject of my latest book, was how, you know, I mean, clearly buying an unregistered Belgian army truck in the Netherlands, and importing it into the UK and then converting it into a home on wheels fit for a trip to Mongolia, was not what you would call a straightforward process, particularly
No.
when we'd never done it before and had no idea what we were doing. So, you know, we just have this like blind faith that, you know, things will work out, and, you know, that we're resourceful enough to work it out for ourselves.
Sure.
So the history of the vehicle is quite interesting, because it was 30 years old when we bought it. It was built in 1990, and it had 4,500 kilometres on the clock. So it had literally just never been used. I mean, I'm guessing the year of manufacture is a bit of a clue there, that that was the end of the Cold War. So I suspect they'd ordered it when the Cold War was in full swing. And then, of course, 1989, the wall came down and the whole, you know, kind of landscape of Europe changed in that sense. So I think basically it has just sat on an airfield for 30 years, been driven to the maintenance yard for, you know, kind of a couple of times a year. And then when it was decommissioned at 30 years, you know, it's just like, right, off you go, you know, we'll sell it. But I mean, the engine block was duck egg blue when we bought it. I mean, it had just never been used. You know, the cargo box on it was pristine. You know, it was like no scratches, no nothing. I mean, the only thing with it is that the paintwork was a little bit weathered, because it's obviously sat outside for 30 years. But yeah,
and
never been
I know
used.
Mark may be hearing you, and they're certainly hearing you in the background. Are you both pretty handy? Can you hold your own under the engine, under the bonnet, the hood?
Well, no, not particularly. I mean, one of the reasons we wanted like an older truck was that it is purely mechanical. There's no electronics on this truck. So, I mean, it very much comes into the kind of clang it with a hammer sort of school of maintenance. But I mean, anybody could work on it. Anyone who understands, you know, just basic mechanics can work on it. I mean, you know, we're sort of sensible and practical, but we're not engineers by any means. As I say, I'm a scientist, and Mark was a logistics manager, so he did manage trucks, but, you know, actually, I mean, all the maintenance was done by the maintenance department. It wasn't something he was doing. But yeah, we just figured, I think, you know, it's just that we figured there's always a solution, you know. So
well, you've done well. So, because you've been on the road since 2016. Was that when you went full time?
Yeah, we went full time in 2016, and then we finished converting the beast, as we called the army truck. We finished converting that in July 2021. So we've been traveling around in that since July 2021, but we haven't made Mongolia yet, because unfortunately, well, coronavirus happened, which obviously kind of all in 2021, we were driving around in a 6-wheel army truck, and everyone was kind of saying, oh my goodness, you must have been to some amazing places in that. We were like, well, yeah, we've been to Manchester, you know, but we literally couldn't get out of the country. Yeah, we had to sort of stay in the UK for the lockdowns. And then when the borders opened up, Vladimir Putin invaded our route, because our route to Mongolia is through Ukraine and Russia, which at the moment is not something I would feel safe or confident doing. So for the moment, we've just been touring around in Europe.
Right. Your dogs are being very quiet, very good in the
They're
background.
being very well behaved.
Do you
Yes.
still have 4? Because you had 4 puppies at the beginning of the process. So what
we
are
still
they?
have 4. They're
What are they?
Cavapoos,
Oh,
so they're a
nice.
cross between a Cavalier and a Poodle.
Cool.
So they're
Yeah.
quite small. They
Right.
don't shed, and they're
Yeah.
quite intelligent. I mean, bless them, they've been travelling since they were 1. They're all about 9 years old now, so they've been travelling nearly all their lives, and they're kind of used to it. But I have to say, you know, we do kind of organise things around them. So we always tend to park somewhere where there's lovely walking or some water for them to play in, either on a beach or next to a river or something like that, you know, so they love that.
But you'd want to anyway, because you walk a lot.
Oh, yes.
You'd go anyway.
It's what we enjoy. Yeah, that's what we enjoy doing. I mean, they come on the stand-up paddle boards with us. We've not windsurfed with them yet. I think that might be a bit tricky, but they do go on the paddle boards. So, yeah.
Amazing.
And then
Because they
we
do
have
feature,
like... Sorry, yeah,
steering it back to
yeah,
writing, because they do
yeah.
feature a lot heavily, don't they, in your writing
Yes, so, I mean,
and
I
your dogs.
called my first series of books was called Adventure Caravanning with Dogs, because the dogs are little characters, and I think, I mean,
Mm,
people from my blog, I mean, my writing, the books kind of came from my blog, and people did like the dogs as little characters because obviously they all have their own little personalities and little
sure.
quirks and things. So, they add
Mm,
a little bit of colour to it. And then
mm,
we call it adventure caravanning because it's kind of caravanning, but not as you know it.
yeah.
We didn't kind of sort of go straight down to Spain and sit on a beach. We've
Mm,
actually towed the caravan over the Carpathian Mountains on Jeremy Clarkson's favourite road. So on that occasion, the caravan joined the Mile High Club
oh, yeah.
because we went up, over, I can't remember how many meters it was, but it was very high up. And
Mm,
yeah, we've sort of crossed rivers on little rafts and all sorts
yeah.
of things with this
Yeah.
caravan. So yeah, it was,
See,
yeah,
I am a bit of a geek and a bit of a tech, and I love watching Top Gear. But it was the adventures that I preferred of all
yes,
the not so much the studio and the racetracks,
hmm,
but it's the
yeah,
three of them going completely nutty, and some
yeah,
of it's sort of fixed when one of them
yeah,
breaks down and the others abandon. Usually Richard,
yeah,
he's
usually,
left to his own devices, and they go off on their
mm,
adventures. They're great fun,
yes.
great fun. The
Yeah, oh no,
interaction between the three
it
of
is
them
great.
is
Yeah.
hilarious.
Well,
Yeah,
I do like Jeremy Clarkson.
yeah,
Yeah, he's very entertaining. I'm not sure I'd
yeah.
like a pint with him because,
Right.
yeah, I'm sure he can be quite a difficult person, but he is very, very
Yes, yes,
entertaining. Yeah, if you watch
absolutely.
the Top Gear episode in Romania on the Transfiguration, that's what we towed a caravan
Okay.
over, which I
I
thought I did it
probably have. I
particularly.
think I've seen them all.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I did it in honour of Jeremy because he hates caravans, so I felt that we had to
Okay.
take ours
Yeah,
on
I
his
think
favourite
they
road.
blow up quite
They
a few
usually
in the
blow them up or drop them off cliffs
yes,
or things
don't they?
like that. So
Absolutely.
yes.
Yeah. So do you
Mm.
design your own covers, or once your book is
No,
ready, or do you have a cover
yeah.
designer to do
I
that?
have a cover Yeah, I have a cover designer. I'm not terribly artistic.
Mm,
So when I published the first series, I found a lovely lady called Debbie who did all my covers for me.
mm,
Sadly, she's retired now, so
okay.
I'm just in the process. I did have another company who sort of designed the cover for my book about building the beast, which is about how we built this lorry camper, but I
Mm.
wasn't it's not too bad, but I'm not thrilled with it.
It's
So
not
I'm in the
no.
process of appointing another cover designer at the moment. But it is very, very
Mm.
difficult to find someone, who can kind of just produce, sort of what's in your mind. That you need someone
Yeah,
who's a mind reader. That
yeah.
was what I loved about Debbie, who did my previous covers, because I just
Mm,
sort of gave her an idea of what I wanted, and then what came back was like, "That's it. Yes,
yeah.
that's it."
Because the
No
thing is,
tweaks, no
it's
nothing.
without you can't
Yeah.
really expect a cover designer to read the whole book.
Oh,
You
no,
can
no,
only
not at
guide them,
all.
but they have to. If
Yeah,
you find someone, it's like an editor. If you find someone who gets you and gets your
yes,
writing, then it's a good
yes.
team. It's a good team, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
No, that's it. I mean, Debbie was, like exceptional in that way. I mean,
yeah.
obviously, I can write a brief and sort of say these are comic memoirs about travel with dogs and
Mm,
so on and so forth. And
yeah,
she was always very good at, kind of getting the concept of, whichever country we were traveling in. I mean,
yeah.
each of my books in that series cover about like 1 year of our travels. So, the first
Right.
one was France, the second one was Germany, the third one
Yeah,
was Romania. So
right.
yeah, it's that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Mm,
And you obviously do because marketing is the sort of umbrella for blogging, and so you
sure.
find readers
Yes.
that way, and social media. And do you do any? I mean, it must be difficult when you're traveling around to do any sort of in-person events.
Yeah, it's very difficult because when we're traveling, often we're out of the UK for a year at a time.
Mm,
So it is difficult to, do any kinds of talks or appearances other than online, this
mm,
kind of thing, sort of doing
mm,
chats online. So I've done a few interviews, for example, with Bournemouth Writing Festival and so
right.
on and so forth.
Yes.
And actually, funnily enough, now that we are back in the UK, I'm at Stratford at the moment and I am doing a talk at Leek Loves Books, which is
nice.
up in Leek in Staffordshire. So I'm doing that in
Yeah.
about a week's
Yeah.
time. But
Oh,
that will
exciting.
be my first in person
Right.
appearance actually since I published the first book.
Right.
Mm.
Wow. Exciting, but
Mm.
nervously exciting. I love them. I love
Well,
doing them.
yeah, no, that's it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm fortunate. I mean, in my past life, I was a sales and marketing person,
Mm.
and I used to be a trainer as well. So I'm not sort of unfamiliar
You're
with
used to,
public
yeah.
speaking.
Yeah.
So although
Yeah.
it's always a little bit more icky talking about yourself, isn't it? Really, it's funny. I can sort of
Yeah.
sit and present a company's products or whatever, but
Mm.
then actually sort of talking about yourself
Yeah.
is sometimes a little
Especially your
bit more like,
babies,
ooh.
something you've
Yes.
produced. Yeah.
No, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
because I was always, as a good northern upbringing, I was always taught not to brag and not to be vain and all of this,
Yeah.
and then all of a
Yeah.
sudden you're up there. But
Yeah. I think we have to
yeah,
though, as because as writers we're
mm,
quite insular, aren't we? But I think we have to put on
yeah,
a persona where we are jolly and speak to,
mm,
5 people or 50 people or 500 people, and we
yeah.
just have to go up and I think if we love what we do, then it certainly helps. It gives us the
Oh, for
confidence to,
sure.
and we know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So,
Well, absolutely. I mean, when I did training, I sometimes had to present, like a given script, and I do
mm,
find it a lot easier to present
mm,
something that I'm familiar with or that,
yeah,
I've written myself,
yeah,
certainly.
yeah,
And I mean, as a salesperson, I always felt that integrity was very important, and there's no way I could
mm,
have sold something that I didn't have confidence in.
sure,
And for me as a writer, I'm proud of what I've done. I'm proud of my work. I
mm,
appreciate not everybody will like it,
mm,
but you can't
yeah,
please all of the people. But I feel that as long as I'm happy with it and I'm, feel that I have a good product, as it were,
yes,
that my
absolutely,
books are entertaining and informative.
yeah,
That's all you can ask. So
mm,
I'm kind of happy with that.
yeah, and it's always lovely
Mm.
getting feedback on it. So what's
Sometimes.
next? Some yes. So I think
Yeah,
the
mostly. Yeah,
editing process is another conversation. So
sure.
what's next? What's next for you?
Well, what's next is it'll probably be skiing. We're back in the UK at the moment because we have to do our 90 days out of the Schengen area. As I say, we did a
Right.
trip around the Baltics earlier this year,
Yeah.
so we
Yeah.
have to be out for a while. But we are actually going
Yes.
to move back in the brick because we've been renting out our house for
Ah.
9 years to fund our travels. And I
Mm.
mean, it is virtually derelict. So, yeah, we are going to have to
Wow.
kind of move back in and decorate that
Get
and
it.
just tickle it up a little
Gosh.
bit. But
Yeah.
then come
Until
January, we'll
the feet
be.
itch again.
Yeah, that's right. In January, we're
Yeah.
going to go to Italy skiing, so
Right.
we'll be
Oh,
there for a
nice.
couple of months, and then again
Yeah.
we'll have to do our 90 days out. So
Yeah.
we'll come
Yeah.
back to the UK, and we haven't
Right.
decided yet whether we will go in the beast or back
Yeah.
in the brick, as it
Right.
were. But yeah, we'll see. There's a few novelties about sort of moving back into a house that I'm
Mm.
quite looking forward to, such as having a bath and
Right.
so on and
Gosh.
just being able to kind of get things delivered and all
Yeah.
the things that
Yeah.
are actually really
Have an
quite difficult
address.
when
Yeah.
yeah, that's right, when
Yeah.
you live on the
Yeah.
move. It's
Yeah.
those
Absolutely.
things. It's funny, the small, like really everyday things that you
Yeah.
miss, to be
Yeah.
honest. So yes.
Well, it's been lovely chatting with you. I can hear
Hmm.
my dog, which means my husband's going off to
Oh
work.
right.
So
Yes.
I'll yes, we shall speak to you again October, November about your books.
Lovely.
Start with the first one and work our way through them. So it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, Jackie, for joining me today, and it's lovely to put a face to the Word Count Wednesdays.
Thank you very much
You're
indeed.
very
It's been a
welcome.
pleasure.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye now.